Hey everyone! In this tutorial, we will create an explosion using the Niagara system, such as you see here using Unreal Engine. Alright, now that we are in Unreal Engine, let's go to Games, set it to blank. We're going to create a blank document, and just go ahead and tell Unreal Engine where you want to save your work, and just give it a name. And for the project default here, we're just going to leave it as is, and hit Create. Now, once you load up Unreal Engine, I want you to go to the plus sign here, and then you're going to go to Unreal Marketplace. Now, we are going to go to our search products here, and we're going to type in Realistic Starter VFX. Now, we're going to be downloading a free texture pack that will allow us to create amazing particles within the Niagara system. So this right here, Realistic Starter VFX Pack Volume 2. And just click on Add to Project and make sure that you choose your project and Add to Project. Now, once you're all done, you're going to see within the content browser, you're going to see the Realistic Starter VFX Pack of Volume 2. And that's within the content folder here. Go ahead and click on the content folder. We're going to create a few more folders here that will keep our stuff organized when we are creating our visual effects. Let's go ahead and right click, new folder. Let's go ahead and create a materials folder. This is where our materials for our particle system is going to go to. And let's go to new folder and let's create one called Niagara. This is of course where our Niagara system is going to go to. Now I want you to save your work already. Just go to File and you have to save your level first. So save current level as, and just give it a name. I already saved mine. I called it Explosion Poison, and you see it right here. I saved my file already. And another thing that you should do is just go to Edit and Project Settings here, and then you're going to go to Maps and Mode. For the editor startup map, let's go ahead and set it to the level that we have currently saved. So every time we open up our project here, it's going to that specific level. Explosion Poison is the name of my file. X that out. Yeah, and just every time you make changes, you just always make sure you save all. Now the texture that we're going to be using for our explosion, you could find it in the Realistic Starter VFX Pack folder here. You're going to drop down arrow, and then you're going to see textures. There's a lot of cool textures here that you could use. You have the water texture, you have some spark texture there, you got bubbles. So you guys could feel free to mess around with this later on, but specifically for this tutorial, we're going to be using this explosion, see Explosion F. If you double click on it, you could see exactly what you're getting. It looks like a nuclear explosion, which is exactly what I want. And we see that there's the RGB, and then we have A. So the RGB, that means we have the color. And we also have the A, which is for alpha. So we're going to have a transparency map included on this already, which is very important when we apply this on our particle system. So we're only going to see, we're going to have this without the background. Because we turn this off, we have a black background. But since we have an alpha, you can see that's going to become transparent, the black background. So we're not going to see that black background. We're only going to see what we need, which is going to be this nuclear explosion thing. All right. As you discern, this is going to play like an animation. It's going to play like a flip book. So this is going to show first. Well, at first it's going to be empty, and then we're going to see this, and then this is going to be in this order. All right. So this is like a series of images. It's very important that we have this, and we're going to have this animated in the Niagara system. We could just go ahead and X that out. So go into our materials folder, and we are going to be creating our master material for our particle system. Let's go ahead and create, and let's go create a material. And yeah, we could go ahead and name it M Explosion. All right. And we could go ahead and double click on it. All right. And in here, we are going to drop in the texture that we want. So we could go ahead and click and drag this tab right here. So now we could see the tab for our scene, and then we tab for our material. And we could go back to our area where we have our textures that we want, which is going to be the T Explosion F. And we could go ahead and drag this here, so we are seeing our window here, and then we could just go ahead and click and drag this onto our material view here. And then we could go ahead and drag this back right here where it belongs. So now we have our texture here that we are going to be using. This is going to be the nuclear explosion texture. And if we plug in our texture sample onto the emissive color like this, you can see that we see our texture there, but there are a few more things that we have to do here to make it more efficient and something that we could control. So we could just go ahead and delete this. I'm going to go ahead and Alt click on it to delete the wire, but we have to select our material here. Make sure you select this, and we have to modify a few things. We have to change our blend mode here from opaque to additive. In order for the transparency map to work, it has to be additive. And then for the shading model, we need to make it unlit, okay? If you leave it at default lit, it's going to show the reflection. It's going to show the glossiness, which is not what we want. If you're doing characters or environment and then your models, and you could leave it at default lit, but I'm going to set it to unlit, okay? Now, we have our texture here. We could go ahead and plug in the emission color here and then plug in the alpha. A is for opacity, so that's going to be transparency. If you plug this in here, all right, so we see something going on here. You can see the explosion images, the explosion sprites, and you could also turn on the preview to plain primitive so you could see it better. So turning this on is very important, and if you zoom in, you could see exactly what's going on. You could see the sprite. Now, you could leave it like this if you know that you're not going to change the color, right? If you know you're not going to change the color of the explosion, you could leave it like this, and you could assign this material for your particle system. But I know that I want to have customized color for this. I want to change it to like a green explosion, so it look more like a poison explosion. So if you know that you're going to change the color of your particle system, you can just plug it in like this. So I'm going to go and alt click here. Now we have to right click and we have to add a particle color node right here. And we're going to have to combine the particle color node and the texture for explosion together. Let's go ahead and right click and let's go add a multiply. Now we're going to be adding the RGB and the RGB for our texture. We're going to combine those two to our multiply here. We're going to combine those. And let's go ahead and do that. So this is going to be the color for the particle color and for the texture for our nuclear. Now remember, this also have a transparency map, an alpha, which is going to connect to the opacity. So this is also going to be it for the particle color. Now for the alpha, to combine the alpha for the texture and for the particle color, we have to create another multiply. So right click and multiply. Okay, I'm actually going to drag this here, drag it there. All right, and then plug in the alpha onto A and the alpha for this to B. All right, and now we're going to plug in our RGB connection together, combined. We're going to plug that in onto the emissive color. And then for our alpha combine, our transparency map combine for these two, we're going to plug it in onto the opacity. And yeah, just go ahead and make sure you save it. Now, it could get really annoying with the background there. If you don't like seeing the background and you want to see more of how your texture here look like, how your sprite look like, you could go to the preview scene settings. If you don't see the preview scene settings tab, just go to window and turn on preview scene settings. And yeah, with there, you could go to the environment and you could go ahead and turn off show environment. And then you could even change the environment color. Let's say I want to set it to black. There you go. And you could also turn off the floor if you don't want to see the floor. All right, cool. And yeah, go ahead and save it. And then we could go back to our tab where we have our main scene. Now we have to go back to our materials folder. So we have our master material here, M explosion. And you know what? I'm going to go ahead and call this one master at the end. Now we want to go ahead and create an instance material for this. The purpose of creating master material is, let's say you want to create some more materials that are similar to this, but not quite. Maybe you're going to change the texture for it later on. You're going to add different texture. Maybe you're going to play around with the spark texture here later, or the water texture. Then you don't really have to recreate this network, the shading network again. because you're going to be creating an instance for this. So you have a master that will allow you to keep on using the same shading network. And we're going to go ahead and create, right click, create material instance. And then we're going to call it M. Actually, let's call it MI. So that's for material instance. So it's just a duplicate explosion. All right. So now I'm going to go ahead and drag this MI explosion onto my Niagara folder. All right. So remember, we have two folders, the materials and the Niagara. And I'm going to put it right there. So now if I go to my Niagara folder, I could see my material instance inside that folder that we're going to be using later on for our particles. Now, in order for us to create visual effects here in Unreal Engine, we have to create a Niagara system. Let's go to our Niagara folder, right click, and let's go Niagara system here. New system from selected emitter, click next. And here we're going to see some templates here that we can mess around with. The one that we're going to be using is going to be the Simple Sprite Burst because we want full customization and full control of how we want our particles to look like. And click on the plus sign and click Finish. And let's go ahead and rename this. NS for Niagara System _ explosion. Press Enter. So this Niagara system is going to be our it's like a container where you're going to be able to add some emitters to be able to control the shape of your particles. Let's go ahead and double click on it. So now we're inside a Niagara system overview. And you're going to see some nodes. We have the NS explosion node and the Simple Sprite Burst node. Now the main node that we're going to be predominantly using is the Simple Sprite Burst. Now we could just turn this off because if it's slowing down your computer, you don't really need that right now. This is where you're able to press play and rewind so you could able to see your particle system play here in the previous settings. But yeah, so now let's go ahead and talk about the Simple Sprite Burst here. You're going to see that there's some sections here. There's the emitter spawn section, emitter update section. We have the particle spawn, particle update, and the render section right there. And for each of these sections, we see the add button. Now, you're going to be able to add some codes here for each of these rows for your Simple Sprite Burst to be able to shape out your particles. Now, the keyword that you need to know here is going to be the word spawn and the word update. The word spawn means that anything that you add, any code that you add here is only going to be played once. Any code that you add on the update, the word update means is going to play every single frame. So every code that you add here on the update is going to play throughout the entire animation. So that's very important to know there. Now, what exactly are these and what can we add here and how is it going to shape our particles? So let me explain that. For the emitter spawn, the emitter spawn here, we're rarely going to be using that. But what you add in this stage initializes the operation or setup and only happens once. Now, the emitter update here, you will be able to control the number of particles that you want for your visual effects. The particle spawn here, in this stage, you're going to be able to fully control the initial size, initial location, and initial color of your particles. In the particle update, here you're going to be able to oversee how your particles are able to move. So in here, you're going to be able to add forces like wind and gravity and even modify the color every single frame for your particle. So remember the keyword spawn, keyword update. Spawn means play once, update means every single frame. And last but not least is going to be the render section here. For the render section, you're going to be able to direct how your particles are going to display or present. You are going to have the ability to implement the materials or the sprites that you want in this category. Another thing that you need to keep in mind that is very important is the way that Niagara system works is it plays the Simple Sprite Burst from the top of the stack to the bottom. Because remember, in order for a particle system to appear, you must have an emitter. For the particle to be emitted, you must have an emitter. So what happens is any function that you add, place at the beginning at emitter spawn, and then emitter update, particle spawn, particle update, and last is render. Okay, so let's go ahead and create our actual explosion. Right now, all you see is a white circle because if you go to our renderer rollout here, on our render section, the sprite renderer, we see that the material that is being used is the default material, which is just basically a white circle. We're going to change this to the material that we have actually created. So we can go ahead and drag this tab right here, and let's go back to our main viewport area. And on our Niagara folder, remember the material instance that we have made with our sprites assigned to the material. Let's go ahead and select that. Okay, make sure it's selected. Go back to your Niagara system and then back onto your sprite renderer. On the material section, you're going to see an arrow. Click on the arrow. That's going to be for selected asset from content browser. Click on it, and now you should be able to see the material assigned here on the particle, and it's basically just a series of images that makes up the flipbook that is supposed to animate. And of course right now there's no movement, which is not what we want. We want this to be actually be animated. If you press play right now on your timeline, this is what we have. All right, so in order for this to play how we want it, we need to add a sub UV animation on our particle update. So let's go to our particle update rollout here. Click on the plus sign and let's add a module called sub UV animation right here. Okay, and you're gonna see that there's this little error there, errors, and it says no sprite renderer selected. So just go to your source rollout here on the sprite renderer area. Just click on sprite renderer. All right. And right now, we still don't see anything happening. There's one more thing that we need to do to be able to see the actual animation. Go back on the sprite renderer here. And I'm going to go in and just pause this for now. Okay, actually, let me play it. Okay, so what we have to do is we have to go to our sub UV here. Okay, we're going to see sub image size 1 and 1. We have to change this value. If you look over here on our sprites, we have to count how many images that we see going in the horizontal direction in this row right here, and how many images we see in this row going in the vertical direction. So for the horizontal part, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So 8 photos here for the sprite going this direction. And now we have to count going down. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And yeah, we see that little where it starts to fade out, 8. So we have to put 8 by sub image size. So let's go ahead and change that. I'm going to set it to 8 and 8. Okay. And if you see that it's still not being animated like it's supposed to, that's because we have not right here on the timeline. Don't forget to press play to be able to see the actual animation. All right. So now we actually see the explosion being played here. Now, if you think this is too small, we can make it bigger by going to our particle spawn here and initialize particle. And there you're going to see a uniform sprite and the sprite attributes. We're going to set this size to a larger value, set to 100. So now we got a much bigger explosion. Now, let's say that you want to change the color of this. So you want to change it, just go to the particle update. So you're probably thinking, how do I know whether to put it on the particle spawn or particle update? So remember what I said. Spawn is if you only want it to run once. Update if you want it to run every single frame. So I want the code for how this changes color. I want it to run throughout the entire animation. So I wanted to change color, the entire animation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the particle update on this. Right now, there's a scale color. We're going to use something else that's going to give us a lot more control. Let's go ahead and delete this scale color. And then we could click on the plus sign and we're going to add something called just color right there, color. And then we're going to go to our color and then there's going to be an arrow here. Click on it and then click on color from curve. And so now we're able to add customized color on the curve here. And at the same time, we're able to adjust the opacity, how transparent we want our particle to be. So this area will control the opacity. And here is going to be the actual color of the particle. So let's go ahead and I'm going to change this. I'm going to double click here and change it to more of a greenish color. And press OK. And then we could click and create another slider here. And for this one, Maybe I'm gonna go for maybe even a lighter, maybe a darker green. Actually, brighter green here. And then here is gonna start out a darker green. Okay, and press OK. And then I think I want it to be opaque at the beginning, and then it slowly fades out. But I think it's fading out too soon, so I'm gonna go click here so it's not gonna fade too fast. So this is gonna be from here, from this slider to this slider, it's going to be opaque, as you can see there. All right, very nice. Now you can see at the end it turns white because on this slider here I have set it to white. So I'm gonna double click here. If you want to delete the slider, just select it and press delete. But yeah, I'm gonna go to the white one, double click on it, and I'm gonna set it to maybe slightly yellowish. Yeah, exactly like yellowish, like that. So press OK. All right, great. Now we could also go to our emitter update here, and on our emitter state, the loop behavior plays once. If you want a particle system to continue playing and playing over again, and you could set it to infinite. Now, right now, since we do have a sprite, it's not really affecting it because we have the animation looping for the sprite renderer. Now, another thing that you could do if you want to kind of change the way the movement is for this particle, you could go to your particle update and you could add, let's say I'm going to go click on the plus sign. I could add a velocity here. Maybe a sprite. Maybe I want it to rotate. So I'm going to put sprite rotation rate. So I'm going to go sprite rotation rate. And then here for the sprite rotation rate, you can see the settings here. I have it on 1. If I set it to 50, look how cool that is. There's a little bit more interesting effect here. It starts to go in this direction as it animates. It kind of swirls like this. All right. So let me show you. Okay, so right now you see it. It's very nice. Now if you notice that this is slowing down your computer, the particles, there's one way to fix that. If you go to properties right here, we have it as CPU. If you have a really big amount of particles that you want to play here and you notice that it's really slowing down your computer, you could set it from CPU to GPU and make sure you set from dynamic to fixed. All right, so you're gonna get less freezing up on here. Now you can see we have this beautiful little explosion happening. Very cool. Now another thing that you could do if you want to change the shape and location for this, maybe you want this to be all spread out everywhere as it explodes. You could go to your particle spawn area and click on the plus sign and you could add a shape location, right? There you go. And then you could see we have our explosion happening everywhere. And another thing, what we could do, we could also change this on the shape location. We have this called sphere radius. What's happening is it's being exploded within a certain radius value. Let's say I want it to be not to be spread apart. It's too spread apart right now. I'm gonna go and pause it right now. I'm gonna go and set this to 50. And if I press play, you can see that the explosion is not so far apart from each other where it's happening and where it's being spread out. All right. And so let's say I want it to be closer together. I'm going to set it to 25. Press play. Okay. And I actually do want it to be even bigger, the particle. So I'm going to go ahead and go to my particle spawn, initialize particle, set the sprite size to 250. All right, and I'm going to go and press play. Go. Now we could change the lifetime of this. To change our lifetime, basically how long the overall particle will last. We go to our initialized particle here. On our lifetime, we set it to 2. Let's say I set it to 10. You can see that's going to go slow, the explosion. If I press play, see how slow that is? And if I set it to 1, it's going to go faster because it has a much shorter lifespan. There you go. And if you are happy with this, you could go click on save. And we could go ahead and drag our Niagara system explosion in our scene. Let's go ahead and drag this here. could press F to zoom in. Okay, move it up. Move it up higher. There's our explosion. Okay, so let's say if it's a little too small for your taste, you could always go back and go to your initialized particle and make it as big as you want it. Let's say I'm going to set it to 1500. All right. So I'm going to go over here. Make sure you press save. Now we have a much bigger particle. You could see that. I'm going to drag it up. One thing I like to do here, I also like to set the location of our particle in 0, 0 direction. So I'm going to go to location here and set it to 0, 0, and 0. And I'm going to go ahead and press F. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and slightly move it up. There you go. Zoom in. And I also like to change the light here. That way we have a darker scene. So I'm going to go to my directional light. And I'm going to go ahead and just move up the directional light. And I'm going to go ahead and rotate it so we have a darker scene here. Alright. And there's our particle. We press G on our keyboard to hide the icon. Go. So we got a very cool particle system going. Another important thing that I want to show you, if you guys go back to your Niagara system, in the emitter update here, if you want to increase the number of particles that's being spawned, you could go click on the plus sign here and type in spawn rate. You could add a spawn rate module here. On the spawn rate, if I set it to 1, it's only spawning once. Now let's say I want to keep on going and add more particles. If I add 5, you could see that it's spawning 5 times within a lifetime. Set it to 100. See how you could have thicker explosion, but of course that's not what we want. I'm going to set it to 3. So you could see that it's continuously spitting out poison. Let's set it to 1. I think 1 is what looks the best. Alright, so that is it for our explosion. I hope you all learned a lot from this. Feel free to play around with the other textures within the VFX folder and implement what you have learned from this video. Now, this is just a basic VFX tutorial and there is a lot more to learn. So if you want to see more VFX tutorials like this, please let me know under the comments below. Hope to see you all soon in the next Victory 3D tutorials.